A while back, I dove into finally watching the entire Scream franchise for the first time, right around when the sixth film was coming out. I binged them all within like 3 days so I can watch them all back to back. And that was the first time I watched Scream, the entire franchise ever. And now I'll be watching them all a second time for the first time. So I'll be coming to this with all the knowledge of the whole films going back to Scream 1 and seeing how that is and how that lines up and whatnot. I freaking love Scream, and it's become one of my most favorite franchises. And this is coming from a guy who doesn't typically like horror films or slasher films, but by this point, you're starting to make a fan out of me. Holy shit. So, Scream 1. I bought a six pack of the DVD, a little six collector thing. I actually have it right here. Ha, there we go. Bought this puppy right here. Sorry if the lighting isn't very good. I'm going with a Halloweeny vibe here, so I do not have the lights on as much other than the orange ones in the back there. But there is the six films in this one. Scream 1, though, is the only one on here that seems to be in the letterbox format, which I have never had before. So when I was watching it, it was just like cut out in this like it was like a rectangle just shrunk in, just like they zoomed in or out or whatever to make it look smaller. And not like a wide screen. The aspect ratio was weird. I've never watched a film like that. So that was really tripping me out. I'm like, I hope they're not all like that. No, the rest are all on widescreen. Don't know why the first one's in letterbox, but whatever. That's not my forte at the moment. Looking back at Scream, having watched Scream for the first time a second time, I now notice some things that did not make as much sense to me my first time around. I wasn't sure why the first girl, Casey, was being like, why was she killed? She seemed to be completely disconnected to everything that was going on. But there is some line of dialogue that I caught a lot better this time. A lot more lines of dialogue that, and some even like looks or glances that people give each other that stuck out a lot more having seen it once already and knowing the rest of the franchise and everything. A lot of stuff was making a lot more freaking sense. This is one of those kind of films, I think, that the more you watch, the more stuff you can find, the more subtleties you find and whatnot. I'm pretty sure everybody already knows that with this whole franchise. But yeah, there's a line where Randy, the whole gang was hanging out. Randy points out to Stu, they're talking about the murder and of Casey, and then he was like, I forget what they were talking about exactly, but Randy points out that it would Stu, could potentially have been the killer. He doesn't say this outright, but he's like, hey, she was your ex-girlfriend who dumped you for Steve, the other guy that got killed. Casey and her boyfriend got killed. They're the first ones there that got killed there. I just, that line just went over my head when the first time I watched it. But yeah, he says it right there that Stu and her used to date and that left him for the boyfriend. So it makes sense that these two would want, that Billy and Stu would want to kill them, of course. And there's even in this scene, Stu is like, hey, I didn't kill anybody. And then Billy just says, nobody's saying you did. And the way that he looks at him, the way that he says that is like, okay, without knowing that they're the killers, you could just say that's a friend saying that to him, like, duh, dumbass. But considering they are the killers, yeah, that is him kind of going, hey, dumbass, nobody said you did kill anybody. Stop overacting it, you stupid, So I like that. There's stuff with this, knowing the context and knowing that they're the killers, that make this a little bit more enjoyable to watch because we have this information. We're watching this with a different frame of mind. I mean, it's one of those weird things where sometimes people don't want to watch something twice because they know it's going to happen. But if you're going in and watching it like a second time with a completely different perspective, it's almost like you're watching it for the first time because you're looking for different specific things, even though you know what happens. Also, somehow missed the detail that the blonde chick was Dewey's sister. For some reason, I don't know what the hell I was thinking when I was watching it. I was watching it with somebody, to be fair, so maybe we were giving commentary or talking while the scene was playing, and I just missed that they were related in some way. And that makes a little bit more sense why Dewey is also very protective of Sydney, because he's like an older brother to her, just looking out for his sister, looking out for her friends. Makes sense. There's a lot of things that Billy and Stu do throughout the film that does hint that they could possibly be the killers. The way that they always talk about movies. I mean, Billy, the first time that he has a scene and he's with Sydney, I think he mentioned something about movies or about ratings or something like about like ratings of a movie. And this throughout the film, they seem to reference movies here and there. And of course, Randy is also a movie guy, but he seems to have a completely different attitude about it. He's just going to like he is the man who knows about the movies. He will defend movies. He will correct you and everything. As to where Stu and Billy are more like they know about films, but it's not in the same passion that Randy does. Like, yeah, they like the movies, they like to talk about this stuff, they get it, but it's a little different the way that they were talking about it. And so, with their whole plan being to do this whole killing thing like a movie kind of makes sense, but not only that. I mean, I'm trying to remember, I'm going to rewatch Scream 3, and the guy in that one like pretty much helped orchestrate these two and was a movie guy. And so like all this stuff seems to, all culminate together a lot better by the time it gets to Scream 3. If there was anything to question in Scream 1, and some of it gets answered in Scream 3, which I forget if a lot of people did not. I've heard that some people don't like that type of thing in Scream 3, but we're talking about Scream 1, so I'll try to keep it to just that, and we'll get to Scream 3 when I get there. Ever since I'm talking about other films at the moment, I will say that throughout the entire franchise, and there's so many of them in just the first Scream movie as well, whenever there is a knife that is just moved, or even just a pointy object, pretty much, that gets moved up into the frame, or they just get shifted, whatever, it always makes a shlink noise every time. Even the principal, at one point when he's like dealing with the two hooligan kids that were wearing the ghost face masks, he like just points it at them, and it's like shling, shling. Like, knives don't make that sound. The scissors wouldn't make that sound, but it's like, yet whenever they move the object on screen, it's accompanied with a shlink, shlink, shlink noise. And I almost want to make a compilation of every single shlink sound in the whole franchise, because I'm pretty sure, my bet is that there's like 200 in the entire franchise. There's so freaking many. The way that the film leaves all this mystery, it gives you all these different clues, and it unravels as it goes. I love this. Being one that doesn't typically like slasher stuff, this was a great type of slasher, because it's not just there's a person that's trying to kill you. It's not like you're going out to a camp. It's not like it's a bunch of teenagers that just like school around and do all the things, as Randy would point out in all these horror movies, all the rules and whatnot, and what happens in every horror movie. Like, this one seemed to not do that exactly. I mean, of course, the whole thing is like a whole bunch of meta commentary about it. And again, before I watched Scream earlier this year, I had the impression that Scream was really bad because of how meta it is. But Scream is the only film I know of that uses the meta-ness of things that everybody knows that's been done 1,000 times to its advantage, to its strength. It's somehow able to use meta type of thinking and knowledge and make that its fucking greatest weapon. It is baffling. I love it. And it's that kind of thing that shows, though, like, how many movies of Scream are we going to get until that starts to break and crack as well, when it's commentary and it's ingenious in a way, starts to just follow the trend and starts to be what it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to comment on it, but when does it become that? Some people would say that it started doing that after the trilogy of these were done, and some would say that fourth is like a good cap off of it as well. If like 3 was good, but if you had to have one more, 4 was all right, and then 5, it's like, ooh, most people hate that one. I'm on that camp too. And then 6, I think, has some value to it, but is mostly pretty bad and did not need to be made. But that's what I'm thinking right now before I go and watch those ones too. I do have a question for Scream people that really like Scream. I'm gonna call you Screamers. I got a question for you guys, though. There is one kill in Scream that I'm not sure needed to happen, or I'm not sure if this was their intention or how this was going to work exactly, because Stu has a party over at his house to have all these people over. This is where they're going to have the grand finale of everything, all the final kills that they're going to do and whatnot is going to be at his house. But there's going to be a whole bunch of kids there, and it doesn't seem like they intended on killing all of the kids that are there. There's too many people, too risky. There's only 2 of these guys that can try to pull this off. They need to frame it right and whatnot, like a big old movie and everything. They got to frame Sydney's dad. So you've got all these kids there, but after Stu leaves and he does the "I'll be right back," and a few minutes later there's a call, and then Randy picks up and he says, "Oh no, the principal's been killed and he's hung on the football field." That's when all the kids decide to leave, drunk and everything. They all leave except for the main people that are going to be at the house. With Randy, you got Gail and Dewey and Sydney in them. Like they are the ones that remain, but everybody else decided to leave because they said the principal was killed. So I was confused as to why the principal was their person of choice to kill. All the other ones seem to make a little bit more sense here with the connections and everything. The principal seemed to just be a distraction so that the kids at Stu's house would leave to go and try to see the body before the police recover it, is what I'm guessing. Because I don't think Randy says who was on the phone or like tries to identify it. So that's probably Stu just saying like he's a police officer. He's like, oh, there's the principal said bodies over there, bro, or something. I'm assuming because we don't get to hear what was on the other line when he spoke, and Billy was upstairs banging with Sydney at the time. That's the only thing I think of that I'm not sure connected well or like worked well into their plan. So I'd be curious what the answer to that is that you guys have in the comments. I'm just not sure about that one. I just love Scream, man. I love it. Gail, Dewey, all this, the whole shebang, all this, the way that Sydney is as a character, at the very end, Randy's like, they always come back for one last scare. Sydney's right there to bop him in the head. She's like, not in my fucking movie. That they know that was a cool little line to write right there. Of course, that's how you do a strong character. She had a lot of struggles. She needed a lot of help, big time, a lot of help from a lot of people, but she is still trying to do her own part. She still plays an active role, and they got out of it at the end. And this is apparently was something very odd for a slasher film to have multiple survivors. Usually there's like one, if not any, that tend to survive, I suppose, with some of these. I haven't checked out all the slashers to know if that's the trend. But yeah, there's like 4 survivors at the end of this one, if not more. I mean, I guess the dad didn't die either. So I mean, there's quite a few people that survived this whole encounter right here. And what I love also, just thinking about it again, Cotton, the guy who was framed for her mother's murderer, pretty much is that guy. Like, he's just like a pretty much a throwaway thing, practically in Scream 1. It's important, but it's just pretty much a throwaway until we get into the second one. And this whole thing, she was so convinced that that guy killed her father, and then after the whole ghost face stuff and the things with Scream around her, like she was really, I love how Gail was really pushing into her about how she could be wrong. She could be trying to get an innocent man killed. And Gail, even though she's very selfish, like for selfish reasons doing this, was doing a good thing, trying to prove Cotton's innocence. That's a good detail about Gail. She will do a good deed if she can see a benefit for herself. That's not the best kind of person, but that is better than a lot of people that could be around there. I'm hoping to do a Scream discussion again with my Scream people, even though they are probably so tired about talking about Scream, talking about Tom Connors and Fansing Vids and Runner and Justin Proper. Those are my Scream guys, and they've talked about it in length for a long time. I've barely talked about it, though. I've only talked about it big time with them once, and I'm watching it all through again. I might want to do that again. So we'll see, guys, okay? We'll see. But I'll just end this video now and start on the second one next. Have a good one.